Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicole and it's time to do the mid-year freakout tag. Now, normally right now, I would be sharing with you a review and a wrap-up of the month of June, but I'm going to keep that simple and I'm just going to put up on the screen the chart that I usually show that shows you, the details of how the month of June went. The only thing I will comment on with this is that, one, I don't know how I managed to read that many books in the month of June. And in all fairness, like the way I film and that kind of thing, really what this chart is showing you is how many books I talked about in the month of June. Some of them may have been started in May, but we're not going to get into that. And the only other thing is that I think I broke the map. So there are definitely countries that I read from that are not showing up on this map, and I don't know that I know how to fix it. I don't know that I'm going to bother fixing it. I have a map on my wall over here that I'm going to start using, and I also have another digital map that I'm going to start using, so I'll probably just start referencing that. I don't know. I'm not going to worry about it. I've got enough to talk about today because instead of my monthly wrap-up, I am going to be talking about the mid-year freakout tag, mid-year check-in tag, mid-year, whatever it is, I'll put it on the screen. Anyway, I have done this tag every year that I have been on BookTube. I almost didn't do it this year, but then at the last minute I was like, you know what, let's do it. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about how the year went so far, and let's talk about it in this way instead of talking about my bingo board. My bingo board for the year is going well, and most of the mid-year freakout tag covers most of the things that are on my reading plans bingo board. So let's get to it. I'm going to read the questions, we're going to talk about it, and it should be a good time. Question number one is, how many books have you read so far? And this is not something I keep track of, so every year when I get to this tag and I look it up, I'm like, oh, okay. So as of today that I'm filming this, I have read 60 books. As of the end of June, I think I've talked about 57 of them, so, there's the difference. But yeah, and I will put up the little yearly dashboard that I have that is in theory tracking what I'm doing during the year so that you can see what that looks like as well in terms of page count. I think it does average rating, that kind of stuff. Question number two, what is the best book that you have read so far this year? So I have been keeping a book bracket, and that has been making it much easier to answer questions like this. I had already completed the book bracket for January and February, March, April, May, all the way through June. I don't know why I'm saying each of the months. And I only had left to choose the best book between May and June. And so you'll see that checked off on my little book bracket thing. And then I had to answer this question, choose between basically the first half of this year, the first quarter of this year, and the second quarter of the year. And the winner is, if I had to choose between the books there, What We Tried to Bury Grows Here. This has been surprisingly my favorite book that I've read so far this year. I've had quite a few 5-stars this year and I'm happy about that, but when I go back and I look at the 5-star books that I've had, this is probably the one that I felt like was the best as a whole, that I really enjoyed from beginning to end, and that also surprised me and is something I would reread and would recommend to other people, and made me aware of another style of writing that I really enjoy, which is having multiple points of view where the main character is not talking about himself, but the only characterization we get of the protagonist is through everyone else in his life. And that is how this book is written. Each chapter is following a different person and what is going on in their life during the Spanish Civil War. But the main protagonist, what is his name again? Isidro. The main protagonist, he has some level of interaction with every character in each chapter, but we get to see Isidro develop as a person through their eyes. And I just thought that was really unique. It's also really well written, and I was really impressed that this was somebody's debut novel. Okay, the best sequel. Usually I get to this point in the tag and I go, I don't have an answer for this, or I feel like my answer is really lame, or like I happened to read a sequel but couldn't really say there was a best one. I had like 2 or 3-ish options this year, but when I looked at them, it was pretty clear to me what the winner was, and that is Gilgamesh. I just recently finished reading this. This is book 2 in the Sumerian trilogy, and I really enjoyed this. I have been really enjoying the trilogy overall. I would probably say in this trilogy, I like book 1 better than book 2, but book 2 was still really good, and in terms of series that I've read this year, this is definitely my favorite sequel philosophical so far. And I think that's good news, because so far it means that if you want to read a trilogy or a short fantasy series, that this might be a good one, because I could honestly say that book 1 and 2 are really good, and it's only 3 books. So yeah, I want to read book 3 after reading this, so that's always a good sign. This is a series that is a retelling of ancient Sumerian or ancient Mesopotamian mythology, and book 1 includes a retelling of the story of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh is one of the many characters that you follow in book 2. Thus far, all 2 books that I've read out of this trilogy do follow multiple people, and I think it's done very well. And I should also include that Gilgamesh is going to come up a few more times during this tag video. For a new release I still need to read, I included both one that I own as well as one that's on my TBR for the rest of the year, which I think is like actually the next 2 questions, something like that. So a new release that I still need to read, a book published in 2026. I don't know if this is the only book that I have that has been published in 2026, or it might be the only book that was published in 2026 that I own that I haven't read yet. Either way, I only had one choice. So the new release I still have to read is The Republic of Memory, and I would actually like to read this before the end of the year. This year I have spent quite a bit of time reading a variety of different books that all have to do with memory in some way, and memory playing a key role, and this should be yet another book. It also has to do with the generationship, which is something that I'm really interested in. I think because it includes science fiction as well as multi-generational family stories in some sort of way, and then it's also combined with memory. Like, it's a couple of different topics that I'm really interested in. So that is the book from my own TBR. The book that I don't own yet that I would like to own and read before the end of the year is We Were Forbidden by Jaqueline Harpman. I have a couple of books that I'm keeping an eye out for to read by the end of the year, or at least own maybe by the end of the year, but this is probably one of them that I definitely like to read sooner than later. Earlier this year, I read I Who Have Never Known Men, and I really enjoyed that. I think maybe it was a little bit overhyped because I do think there were a couple of issues with the plotting and the story itself, but overall I did enjoy the book. I really liked her writing, and I would definitely read another story by Jaqueline Harpman. I like what she does philosophically in her books, and we have been forbidden. Why did I forget the name? We Were Forbidden. Sounds like it's definitely going to have more of that philosophical discussion. It is a collection of novellas, I think 3 or 4 stories, and all of them are supposed to be exploring sort of the tension that people are encountering when something in their life is forbidden them. And I think that is a really cool idea to explore, and I think there's the potential that it's going to be done really well. My biggest disappointment, I don't have that book here to show you because I unhauled it, and that book was Stoner. I was really surprised that I did not like this book, and not only did I not like it, it's probably one of the worst books I read this year. Not in terms of writing, mainly in terms of content. I did actually find the book rather boring, which I feel like is a somewhat unpopular opinion, but I was also really disturbed by the content, specifically the treatment of Stoner towards his wife and the way his wife was characterized. And this is something that I feel like I almost never hear anyone talk about who has done a review on it, though I have seen a few here and there. So yeah, I was really disappointed because I feel like this is a super hyped book that people absolutely love to tears and say nothing bad about. And so when I read it, I was like, what is this? Why is this so boring? And what the heck is going on with Stoner and his wife? The biggest surprise for me, I feel like, had the actual reverse thing happen, where it's one of the lowest rated books on my TBR. It has a rating both on the Storygraph and Goodreads of about 3.3, which isn't as low as I've seen on other people's TBR, but it's the lowest that I found on mine. And this is not a classic, and it's a book I ended up giving 5 stars, and that's a recent read, which is The National Telepathy. This is a pretty short book, and it takes place in Argentina. It was translated. It's put out by Charcoal Press, and I really haven't seen many reviews on this book, and I was a little scared because even on the Storygraph, I think there were only 168 reviews. So I was really surprised to find as I read it that not only was I liking the book, but by the end, I really liked the book. And that's despite the fact that while I was reading, I kept feeling like, what the heck am I reading? What on earth is going on? And then when I finished the book, I had to sit down and like write out and connect on my thoughts. But it was in such an enjoyable way that I'm glad I ignored these star ratings and found a surprise hidden gem. For favorite new author, I'm going to have to go with Mohamedou Ould Slahi, I believe is how you pronounce his name. Earlier this year, I read his work, The Actual True Story of Ahmed and Zarga, and absolutely loved that book. I still need to get a hold of a copy of it. I just thought it was such a touching, moving story that was beautifully told, beautifully written, and of all the books that I read this year, this was the one that probably instantly made me want to read more of this author's writing, and was also a book that made me think that I would probably like whatever his other book was as well. There are some other authors that I would like to read more of, but either because of something about their writing style or something about their other books have made me go, oh, I don't know if I'm going to like their other books, but this is an author that I feel like I probably will. So the next book or work that I want to read by him is his nonfiction one that is about his time being imprisoned at Guantanamo Bay. And I have heard that it's a pretty brutal story, understandably so, but I'm really interested to learn more about his life, and I really hope he writes more. Per usual, I have no crush, so let's move on. Okay, so new favorite character. I do have a new favorite character, and I feel pretty confident in saying that this year because this is a character that I have now read in 3 different books throughout the year, and that character is Gilgamesh. I told you he was going to come back up. So I have read Inanna, which featured the character Gilgamesh. I read the actual Epic of Gilgamesh, which is about the original story that was written about Gilgamesh, and I have read book 2 in the series that is called Gilgamesh. So I've had quite a Gilgamesh-filled year, and I have to say, I can see why Emily H. Wilson chose to write a book about him. He is such an interesting historical figure or historical character. There's still debate about whether or not he was a real person, but I can see why the Epic of Gilgamesh continues to be popular, why somebody would rewrite his story in a fantasy novel. He's just a really interesting character. Like, his story is interesting. He's a very heroic figure that I feel like is always appealing in stories. He's complex. He's living in a very interesting and different time period. And I really like the way the Epic of Gilgamesh talks about him. He is potentially a good guy who starts out doing very questionable things, meets his equal, things kind of go on from there. And then in this book and retelling, as well as in Inanna, he is fleshed out in a really fascinating way where it's like he's heroic, maybe, and I don't know. I just kind of like some of his anti-hero, morally gray kind of characteristics that are also humorous at the same time. It's hard to explain if you haven't read the series, but I've really enjoyed following him in this book, as well as in the Epic of Gilgamesh. A book that made me cry. I'm sure I've read a book earlier this year that I'm forgetting about that made me cry, but for the life of me, I can't think what it is. So if you recall a book that I've mentioned making me cry, let me know. I can think of a book very recently that made me cry. But it was I was laughing so hard, I started crying kind of thing, where I think this is really supposed to be a book that made you sad. So I'm gonna say, if I just said made me sad, I could probably come up with something. But for made me cry, I can only think of the book that I recently read, and I haven't talked to you about it yet, and it's kind of a secret, so I'm not going to share it with you yet. And that includes the same thing for my next answer, which is a book that made me happy, and that would be the same secret book. And I know it made me happy because, like I said, I laughed so hard it made me cry, and the entire book, I had a smile on my face, I was enjoying it, and I laughed out loud multiple times. You'll know what book it is when that video comes out, which will only be in a couple of weeks. For the most beautiful book I bought this year, I had a couple of different options, but these are the 3 books that stood out that I know I was initially drawn to because of the cover art. And then after I read what the books were about, I said, okay, yeah. I'll start with the first one because this one, I literally circled the table it was on multiple times because I wasn't sure if I wanted to buy the book, but I really did think the cover was pretty. And this is The Mysterious Island by Jules Verne. And yeah, this is a Wordsworth classic. Yes, the Wordsworth Classic that also puts out the hideous covers, but what a lot of people don't know is that if you pay just $1 or two more and your store carries it, they also have these really beautiful covers of classics. And the other thing I like about them is that they're inexpensive. So for a really beautiful edition of a work by Jules Verne, I picked this up. I'm sure I will have mixed thoughts about this, but it'll be fun to try anyway. And in the meantime, I mean, it even like opens and flips really nicely. It's just a really nicely made book. So that definitely had to go under this category. Another book that I would include, and I'm just realizing it's really windy outside and I have my windows open. So if there's a lot of weird background noise, including birds, that's what's going on. Anyway, the second book that first drew me to it because of the cover, and it's kind of creepy, but I still think is a beautiful book that I bought this year, is A Botanical Daughter. This is a work of horror, literary horror probably. It kind of reminds me of Little Shop of Horrors. I don't think that's where the purpose of the book is going at all, but it is about two men who are living rather secluded in Victorian London or outside Victorian London. I'm still not clear about exactly where they live, but it's during Victorian times, and one of them is a taxidermist and the other one is a botanist who is content to work in his garden, but then decides to play around with the idea of a sentient plant, and I'm guessing because it's horror that things kind of go downhill from there. But I do like the cover. And then the third cover, which again drew me to the book first and then I read what it was about, is Portalmania. And this is probably the one that wins for me. I don't know what it is about this cover art, but the way it's done with her hand going through the portal on the other side is just so cool. And every time I look at this book, it makes me want to read it. Haven't picked it up yet. It's a short story collection and I'm kind of burnt out on short stories, so I don't know if I'm going to pick it up this year, but I'm glad I bought it. It does sound really exciting and cool, so we'll see when that happens. Books that I most need to read by the end of this year. This is kind of tricky. So I created, instead of a 26 and 2026 list, I created a self-sabotage list that started out intending to be 26 books. I think it ended up as 42 books. These were 42 books that I thought might sabotage all my reading plans. If you're wondering, I'm doing really well on that list. I've made it through about 19 of the 42 books, and I've actually taken about 7 books off that list. So it's actually down to 33 and 26 at this point, and I've read 19 of them. I still have a few to go, and I'm looking forward to ruining my reading plans by reading the rest of them. So I highly recommend this version of the project if you want to actually read the books off that list. Don't include books on there that you should read, is basically what I've learned. So another book that I have that's on that list that I have on my TBR for July would be Lud-in-the-Mist. This isn't a priority read for me in the month of July, so I don't know if I'll get to it. But again, it is a book that has the potential to ruin all my reading plans, so I may self-sabotage myself by reading that in July. And it was also published in July. And it's also a really beautiful book, but I didn't buy it this year, but that doesn't mean I can't read it. Yeah, so there's that. There's books that I have to read for my member book club, but I will talk about that in a moment. So I guess that's it. Those are all the questions. Let me tell you what I am doing next month, because I usually update you on like what's coming up and that kind of thing. I do have at least one book that I have to read next month, and that is David Copperfield. This is my channel members book club pick for June and July, and I can't wait to reread this. It is a mammoth book. It's gonna take me a couple of weeks, and I can't wait. I just can't wait. So that is definitely gonna be read by the end of July, and I will be reviewing it again somehow. And I think that's really the only book I have to read. No, that's not true. I'm in a local book club, and for that book club, I have to read A Song for a New Day, and that is a work of fantasy. I think science fiction. It might be science fiction because I think it's dystopian. It has to do with like music and revolution and something like that. I am also participating now in the Hardest Reading Challenge 3.0, so I will have a lot going on in the month of July having to do with that and going forward. And then I've also decided to participate in Big Book Summer this year. It runs from May 31st or whatever day Memorial Day was. It wasn't the 31st, but it runs from Memorial Day in the US till Labor Day, which is sometime the beginning of September. And basically your goal is to just read at least one book over 400. 400 pages. I'm gonna see how many books I read this year. I'm gonna be updating what I've read versus planning a TBR. So at the end of each month in my monthly wrap up, I will talk about how I did. So to give you an update right now, in the month of June, or since Memorial Day, I have read at least 4 big books. One of them was Dungeon Crawler Caro, and these are the other 3: Uncle Tom's Cabin, Call Me Ishmaelle, and Gilgamesh. So if you are participating in Big Book Summer and are looking for some other big books, you could read any of these 4. I think my favorite of these 4 was probably Dungeon Crawler Carl, followed by Gilgamesh. Though I could see a lot of people really liking Call Me Ishmaelle better than I did. And yeah, that is it for Big Book Summer. I know I have a couple of big books like David Copperfield slotted for July. David Copperfield may be the only one I get to in July, and we'll have to see at the end of July like where that lands in terms of Big Book Summer and how many other big books I fit in. Probably only one other, if anything. And that's it. That is it for today. That is the whole mid-year freakout tag. Let me know if you have done the tag and I'll go check out yours. I always love watching these, but there's already so many to watch that I have to like narrow it down. Anyway, I hope you've had a good reading year so far, and I will talk to you next time. Bye. Oh, and if you're still watching and you stayed till the end, leave me a fraction sign, like 1/2, the numbers 1/2, something like that, to let me know that you have made it all the way through the video, but halfway through the year. Bye.